We are. Welcome to the Redshirt Sophomore Podcast, where we never sit out. I'm your host, Matthew Dawson, and I'm joined by my co-host and brother, Chris Dawson. CD, how we
Oh,
doing? How we doing?
fantastic. Cannot wait to get started here. Episode 1, baby.
I
Been
know I'm
working
pretty
hard for
excited.
this.
I know I'm pretty excited. We got a lot in store for you guys. But first things first, this is a college football podcast. All right. It's a college football podcast. We love talking about college football. So we do have an email, the redshirt sophomore at gmail.com. If you have questions for us, right, you could submit those questions to that Gmail. That is the redshirt sophomore at gmail.com. And we'll try to get to those and we can talk about some of those questions if they're good. But in the end, we talk about what we want to talk about. Come on, CD. What are we doing?
No, for real. Can't wait. Couple things in store today. Nice, easy first episode, but a lot of important stuff. Just because it's the off season doesn't mean we got to take a break. Ain't no way.
Come on, and we never sit out. All right, first thing we got for you guys today is CD and I are going a little toe to toe right here. Going toe to toe. Power 5 coaches draft. Okay, but what's the criteria? Second year coaches only, right? Coaches who had maybe a good season last year, maybe they didn't have a good season last year, maybe they've recruited well.
Tony Elliott.
Unfortunate circumstances over there, but
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
So, all right. So let's just get started. Obviously, okay, we're only doing Power 5 because there's just so many out there. We're each going to draft 2 today. It's a snake draft. We'll have a couple more episodes to assemble our final teams. Okay, but we're going to give the first draft pick over here to Christopher. All right. So there's 14 Power 5 coaches in their second year. That's a lot. But anything you want to say about these second year coaches?
Yeah, real quick, we'll just talk about why this matters. Okay. Second year kind of seems like a weird year. Because everyone's talking about, first year coaches, how they're gonna do. But you'll see a big jump from year 1 to year 2, especially with the transfer portal. It used to be, pre-transfer portal, pre-college football playoff era, it was year 3 was the target year. The recruit, get your guys in, and that third class, that third year, you can start get your culture in. But now with the transfer portal, everything happens so quickly. That second year is the one we're looking for. So we can talk about notable second year coaches from last year. Okay, number 1, Josh Heupel. I mean, what they did at Tennessee they were dead in the water. I mean, Jerry Pruitt and those McDonald's bags single-handedly just tanked them. And Josh Heupel came over from UCF, and everyone's like, that offense not going to work, blah, blah, Mickey Mouse stuff. And they were incredible last year.
They were incredible. No Happy Meals in those bags over there at Tennessee.
I know, no. Secondly, Brett Bielema. And say what you want, outside the Big Ten, 8-5 for Illinois is an incredible year.
How about a top 10 defense?
That defense was loaded. Just look at the NFL draft.
Yep. Now, were those Lovie Get Smith guys that he recruited? Yes, but were they anything what they were this past year without that staff that he brought in there with Ryan Walters and those guys?
And they had an offense. Tommy DeVito was actually a really competent Big Ten West quarterback.
Yep. Big Ten West quarterback.
Make that clear. Lance Leipold. I mean, we love Kansas. You gotta love Kansas football.
You have to.
They won 6 games, and they should have beaten Arkansas.
Well, okay, Arkansas blew. Like, what was it?
They beat Arkansas, didn't they?
No, they lost.
That was that stupid thing at the end.
Arkansas won.
Oh yeah, because they called it at the end. Yeah. Well, who cares? Okay, I'm giving Lance Leipold his props because he deserves it, and he's done it everywhere. There.
And he's done it everywhere. He's done it everywhere he's been.
I don't know why Nebraska. Well, I mean, Matt Rule is a good hire, but I mean, what are these other schools that Auburn should just put the bag on him? Although he isn't bad either. Gus Malzahn. Now, this is their first year in Power 5, so last year they were technically still in the American Conference, but I mean, they went 9-3. Went to the ASC Championship, and they're recruiting really, really well. Malzahn
moving to the Big 12, that's also a key thing too. They needed to get that higher,
right? Big 12, yep, and they did. And it's only going to help them going to the Big 12 for sure. And then how about Shane Beamer? Everybody, every year, pounds the table to take the under on South Carolina. There's
Not
no
on
way
this
they're going to get.
podcast. Not on this podcast.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I know you love Shane Beamer.
I love Shane Beamer. I've loved him the past 2 years.
I did not see a way they were going to top last year in 2021 but 2022. I mean, they beat Clemson and Tennessee, two top 10 teams. But yeah, after losing, they got blown out by Florida.
Blown out by Florida. They lose to Missouri. I don't know. Who cares? But anyways, yeah, all great second-year coaches, and all the reason why, especially with the transfer portal, like you said, and NIL, like these coaches can flip these rosters around really fast, and that leaves some of these guys on this list are actually in the hot seat this year, believe it or not, but they would not have been in past years. It's crazy. All right, so first pick of the Power 5 coaches' second-year draft. Who's Christopher going to select? I think you know what it's going to be.
I mean, I got to take the low-hanging fruit. Lincoln Riley, USC.
You have to.
What else can you say? I mean, first of all, perfect fit. We were just talking about this earlier today. I mean, he could have gone to LSU, and he would have thrived at LSU, but you got to play Bama. You got to play Auburn. You got to play A&M, Arkansas. It's a grind of a schedule. And not that the Pac-12 is a slight, but if you want to talk about, like, recruiting battlegrounds, I mean, he gets to run that Southern California. He gets to go into Arizona, and there's always a good quarterback or wide receiver there in Nevada with, Bishop Gorman.
Yep.
I think that
and to kind of summarize how he got in that position. So Clay Helton got fired right at the end of the 2021 season. He's actually at Georgia Southern right now. Fun fact. That's your water cooler fact of the day. I was going to work talking about college football at the water cooler. There you go. Clay Helton's over there at Georgia Southern. So they have not been good at USC. They have not been very good. Okay. But
they were 4-8 in 2021.
Yep. And
how?
Yes. And also, let's get after this too. Recruiting rankings. 2019, they were 20th in the country, which is unacceptable for USC, by the way. Unacceptable.
But okay, you know what? 20 is still whatever. You're still having an okay class. You can kind of compete in the Pac-12. 20 is unacceptable, but still, you still got to be better than 4 and 8.
Yeah. Okay, but let's get into 2020. Okay, this is not a typo, by the way. USC 24/7. All right, their rankings, because we like their rankings here on this podcast. They're the best ones out there. We can look at their composites too, but 68th. 68th. That's ridiculous. That's terrible. That's so bad. And then 2021, they were number 8 in the country. Clay Helton gets fired. Lincoln Riley brings in the number 1 transfer portal class in the country, top 6 recruiting class. And then this past year, after the season, number 7 recruiting class in the country, right? So a little history about Lincoln Riley. He was Mike Leach's tree. RIP Mike Leach. Came out of Texas Tech. He played quarterback there. Well, didn't really play. Wasn't very good. Turns out he's a great coach. He's East Carolina offensive coordinator for a couple of years, and the Oklahoma offensive coordinator for a few years, and head coach for a couple of years, where we saw several Heisman Trophy winners and NFL players coming out of quarterback. 2022, this past year, they go 11-3, 8-1 in the Pac-12. They win the Pac-12 regular season. They didn't win the championship, and they got blown out by Utah. But if you're not going to tell me that having the number 2 offensively efficient offense in the country is not a big deal coming into the USC year 1, I'm sorry. Yeah, sure, they had Caleb Williams. Yeah. Let's talk about who developed him. That's not the first quarterback he's developed, either Baker Mayfield, okay, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So let's relax about that. But is there anything else that you want to add to that? Like, why are you taking him 1-1 besides from all of these reasons?
Well, to be honest, the only reason the reason why I cemented him at number 1 for me, was I believe in what they're doing on the defensive side, right? They were 107th last year. Grinch is still there, right? The DC, they came from Oklahoma. I mean, everyone loves him, but I haven't seen it, from him yet. But I know the talent has not been there. This year, that changes. You saw last year, I think Colin Cowherd says this all the time, because he's a big USC guy. He's like, in college football with the transfer portal, you can only fix one side of the ball every offseason. And so they're like, I got Lincoln Riley. We brought Caleb Williams over. Let's get an elite offense. You paid off. They won 11 games, right? The second offense rankings. Jordan Addison was first round pick. All these guys. But then they're like, we got to win in the trenches. We got to win defensively. And you saw that. I mean, at the beginning of the portal, they went out and got Anthony Lucas, defense 5-star defensive lineman from Texas A&M, who I know Matthew, tough loss. He was one of those freshmen that flashed. You knew there was going to be an exodus from that class, but
He's very good. We knew
he's a
that.
real good player.
And Lucas is a good player.
It's who's going to be paired next to him? Bear Alexander. First of all name team for defensive lineman.
Fantastic.
5-star
man.
at Georgia, and he pushed those guys. I mean, that defensive front was incredible again, right? So just because you couldn't start at Georgia year one, that means nothing. He's a monster. He's going to be really, real good for them. Went out, got some cornerback from Arizona, Christian Ronald Wallace. That insider seemed to be pretty high on. A couple other defensive linemen from Purdue had a real great spring. Jack Sullivan. And then they went out and addressed the linebacker with Mason Cobb. I know a lot of people were after him from Oklahoma State. He'll play Mike linebacker for them. But actually, an impact freshman they're going to have on the defensive side of the ball, Tackett Curtis, right, linebacker. He's expected to push Mason Cobb, right? That's all signs out of.
That's a big deal. That's a transfer out of Oklahoma
really
State.
Impressive.
A lot of guys wanted Mason Cobb. He was probably the highest rated linebacker in the transfer portal. One of the highest. He's one of the highest.
Yeah,
he was up
for
way
sure.
Up there.
Yeah, and then offensively, they're going to reload. I mean, Dorian Singer from Arizona. If you're not a college football stan, you probably didn't watch many Arizona games. Dorian Singer's legit. Real good player. Been productive for a couple years. I think 2 straight years there. Marshawn Lloyd from South Carolina. Good running back. But they got running back depth there too, so he'll be good support. And then
if you're like me and watch a lot of SEC football, you know who Marshawn Lloyd is, right? He's the guy that your team has a problem tackling, especially there around the goal line.
And then the 5-star Zechariah Branch. I mean, he just looks the part. He's a smaller guy, but to me, he's going to have that Evan Stewart type year where just good cornerbacks are going to struggle to guard him, out the gate. And then, I mean, the future's so bright there with especially the quarterback position. Caleb Williams another year, exactly what you're going to get from him, finger paint and all, but he's going to be a monster. Malachi Nelson, some people had him as a top quarterback in that class and a really good quarterback high school class. They continue to recruit at a high level with him, and they always have. But he's also adjusted. That's why I liked him, is because he adjusted. He knew his weakness, and he's like, we're going to fix our stuff.
And he's proven. I mean, year one, right? I'm just going to talk about over-under win totals. We can move on real quick. 2022, start of the season last year, his over-under win total was 8.5, right? They were already pretty high on him after going pretty.
And I was hitting the under, man. I did not trust that.
Yeah, I didn't trust it either. But guess what? And then now this year, it's 9.5, so people are still pretty high. They're one of the favorites to win the Pac-12. So definitely those are totally wrong numbers. Totally wrong numbers. Last year's 9.5. This year it's 10. What I meant to say. Those numbers obviously reflect on how successful this program has been. And Lincoln Riley's just a great coach. All right, moving on. My pick for 2. Now, there's a lot of guys you can take here. I decided to stay in the Pac-12. Give me Dan Lanning. Are you serious? That Mario Cristobal leaves, right? And everyone said, oh, Oregon's screwed. And then they go and hire Dan Lanning, a young coach who's unproven at the head coaching position. And are you serious? He was unbelievable. So,
well, except that first game. Remember that first game against Georgia?
Yep. He got blown out by Georgia. His old team that he was the defense coordinator at the year before.
Yeah, and everyone wrote him off. Everybody, Bo Nix,
every single person,
just terrible. Dan Lanning, they missed a hire. Blah blah blah.
Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And he hired a great staff there too last year, right? He had Kenny Dillingham, who's head coach at Arizona State right now, did a fantastic job with Bo Nix. And then Tim DeRuyter.
And recruiting
Tim DeRuyter, one
Dante
of the
Moore.
Defensive minds. Now, he left to another one of the guys in this list, Steams, that we'll talk about eventually. But so Mario Cristobal, right, he left from Miami. Before he left Oregon, they were 9-4, 12-2, 4-3, 10-3, right? A successful program. Okay, recruiting rankings, they were 8th in the country in 2019, 14th in the country in 2020, 7th in 2021. So good recruiting class before Dan Lanning got there. Now they dropped off a tick to 16th in the country, but they got good players in that. Those 16 players are good players. So I am not worried about that at all. Dan Lanning, he's kind of been everywhere. He's a college football guy, right? He's young, but he was a graduate assistant in Alabama in 2015. That's how young he is. That's how young he is. He just hired Tosh Lupoi, which is, by the way, another reason why I'm so high on Dan Lanning is that he can get these guys. He can get these high caliber guys, right? Tosh Lupoi was a defensive analyst on that 2015 team. It was the defensive coordinator for a national championship team for Alabama. So and now Tosh Lupoi is working for Dan Lanning. Isn't that crazy? That's how fast it took
I
Dan
love
Lanning
that.
to get up
Well, that's what
on the ladders.
we love about college football. You blink 5 years later, your student analyst is now your boss.
Yep. Now the issue that I have, the only issue that I have is that, they lost Kenny Dillingham this past year to Arizona State. That's a tough guy to replace. It really is. And he went with Will Stein, right? Co-offensive coordinator at UTSA, which obviously was a fantastic offense this past year. Will Stein, he's also a really young guy. He's only 33. He's only 33 years old, so has not had a lot of experience outside that UTSA job, which he only had for a couple of years. He was a high school coach like 3 or 4 years ago at Lake Travis, which has produced guys like Baker Mayfield, right? DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, like really good, not DeAndre Hopkins. Holy blanking. There's some good NFL talent that went to Lake Travis, right there in Austin. So I'm incredibly high on Dan Lanning. Their over-under win total last year was 8.5. They smashed that. They went 10-3, 7-2, which was fourth in the Pac-12. I don't care. Bo Nix looked fantastic. Offensively, efficiently, they were 16th in the country. Defensive efficiency, they were 71st. Okay, but now they got Tosh Lupoi in there. Maybe some better defensive talent in there as well. And the transfer rank in the country was number 8. So they obviously did a good job. Yes, they finished 16th in recruiting, but they also got some guys too in the transfer portal. So I am so high on Dan Lanning, and I think he's going to be there for the foreseeable future. Which, unless he goes to Alabama when Nick Saban's gone, but
The thing is that why everyone was so shocked why Mario Cristobal left, and it just looked bad on Oregon as a program. But if you look at Oregon, I mean, in most of these recruits' lifetimes, right, in the early 2010s, when they grew up watching college football, especially if you're on the West Coast, I mean, it was the Chip Kelly Oregon, right? It was that team, and they've run the West Coast, apart from Stanford with a couple Andrew Luck years, USC back in the early 2000s, but they don't remember that. They were all, it's a new generation now. Oregon's in a great spot with NIL and Phil Knight. Maybe they're moving to the Big Ten here soon. Who knows? And yeah, like you said, they've leveraged the transfer portal real, real well. A couple impact guys to look out for.
Gary Bryant Jr.
Yep, a lot of people wanted him. Yeah, just because he didn't, again, like Georgia's defensive line room, USC's wide receiver room. Just because you didn't crack the lineup doesn't mean you're not a good player. We just ask Ohio State's wide receiver room, right? Jamison Williams. I mean, I'm not saying Garrett Bryant will be a first-round pick, but he's got a talent to be a real good player. Jordan Birch, and people remember him from
very highly sought out in the transfer portal.
Big time recruiting win.
He was a huge recruiting win for South Carolina. It was unfortunate
when he chose them over Clemson. That was huge.
Yep,
huge. Now that was what's his name, the old South Carolina coach.
Will
Muschamp, yeah. But that was his last ditch effort to, save his job, and it didn't work. Yeah. Jordan Birch has been fine. He's a good player, real athletic. They've used him on offense a little bit. I mean, he played tight end in college or in high school. Johnny Cornelius, and if you haven't followed the offseason at all, I mean, he was the number one offensive lineman, right? In that first transfer window, everyone wanted him bad. And he got a little bag, I'm not going to lie, from Oregon to come play there. But, they're leveraging NIL in the right way. Justin Jacobs, another real good player from Iowa, linebacker. He's going to be real good. And people wanted him bad, too. And then a pair of Alabama. Yeah, he's Iowa. A pair of Alabama skill position players, and Kyrie Jackson was started in and out of the starting lineup for Alabama the past 2 years at corner, and then Trayshawn Holden, the wide receiver, who I don't know if I love, but it's not to have SEC experience, it's never a bad thing. Going to help Bo Nix a little bit. He's a bigger body guy.
Yep. Absolutely. So great team overall. Dan Lanny's doing a fantastic job. So we're gonna move on to the third pick here. What does CD have in store for this third pick? I have a feeling I know what you're gonna take, and you're gonna steal it from me. I know.
To be honest, I thought you were going to take him with the second pick, Brian Kelly, LSU.
Oh, there it is.
I mean, who had a more almost surprising success than Brian Kelly? I mean, Lincoln Riley was incredible, and they were in the college football playoff race till the very end. But what he did to win the West, I mean, who had that? Who had that? Right? So Brian Kelly took over for Ed Ogeron.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Yeah.
I mean, Ed Ogeron was a buffoon. We all know that. But he had that fell ass backwards. Well, I wouldn't say ass backwards, but he assembled a crazy talented team, one of the best teams of the decade.
Or did Les Miles do that? But I digress.
Yeah, Ed Ogeron, but he did some things. I mean, Joe Burrow was him. Now it was also the offense coordinator and Joe Brady, but
Joe Brady,
whatever.
And, Dave Aranda, I believe.
He was DC there, yeah. So he had a crazy. That was a crazy team in general.
What a staff! I mean, and a talent. I mean, it was crazy. So,
but he left that program. He drove that right to the ground. But they still had a lot of talent. I mean, obviously, they recruited 6, 4, 4, 7, right? And he walked into like the top 5, top 6, talent roster in the country. They obviously did a couple of transfers last year, but they played real well, right? Brian Kelly, he was at Notre Dame forever, couldn't win the big game, but I mean, you're playing with Notre Dame players, like you're never gonna beat Bama. They beat Georgia that one year, which was cool, but that was not really a great Georgia team. Cincinnati, he was there, kind of put Cincinnati more towards the map. They were pretty good at Central Michigan before that. So last year, yeah, they were 10-4. 6-2 in the SEC, first in the West with that big win,
which is wild. First year coach winning the West. Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean,
that's all you need to tell me. That's all you need to tell me to sell me.
Well, Kevin Sumlin almost did that, but almost. I mean, they beat Johnny Manziel. They had Johnny Manziel, and they still didn't do that. And that was a talented team too. But yeah, their over/under win total was 7. There were people that were doing their schedule, and they were struggling to make them bowl eligible with how
I was realistically one of them because I didn't see Jaden Daniels. I didn't see that talent. Well, I saw the talent. I didn't see how it was going to come all together. There was a lot of new pieces, Well, it's a tough West. It ended up kind of being a down year in the West this past year, but
it's always a gauntlet.
But here's the other thing too I want to talk about because I know you're an expert on this. Acquisitions in the transfer portal. Colorado was number 1 transfer portal or ranking in the country. LSU was 2.
Yeah. I mean, I could go on and on about them, but all you need to know is their cornerbacks were not very good, and they went out and got 4. All right, 2 of them I'm going to give you right now. All right, number 1, Denver Harris. He was the 2nd overall player in the portal for due reason, and you see Matthew Grimace there a little bit. A&M guy. Was in that big recruiting class and played and started as a freshman, and he was incredible when he was on the field. I mean, he made freshman mistakes on and off the field, So we'll see it. We'll see how that.
He's talented, guys. He's talented.
If they can, keep his head on straight, then, he's gonna be shut down for 2 years there. And they've always had good corners, elite corners. And then Zy Alexander. All right, this guy's from southeastern Louisiana, not high school southeastern Louisiana. He played college ball at Southeastern Louisiana. It's an FCS program. Him and his teammate Jack Henderson. Shout out Minnesota Gophers. He's going there. So they had 2 defensive backs go play Power 5 now. This guy ended up at LSU, Zy Alexander. And then defensively, Omar Spates, another one of those, just like Mason Cobb, highly sought out.
All Pac-12.
Oregon State. When we love Oregon State, don't we here? Yeah. And then they brought in Aaron Anderson from Bama, and that he's originally from Louisiana as well.
It's a wide receiver, by the way, for the listeners.
Yep, wide receiver.
5-star out of high school.
Yep, true freshman last year. Played. Not spottingly, he was in the lineup for sure, but they had a lot of mouths to feed there, and to be honest, none of them really or that elite, but no one separated. And he
Right.
was one of the odd men out, but he's still real talented and he's going to put up good stuff. They were upset that they lost him. I know that. And then the recruiting class was incredible too. They brought in 2 wide receivers that people are really excited about, Jalen Brown and Shelton Sampson Jr. They brought in a stud offensive tackle, Zalance Hurd.
On top of their already very young offensive line,
Yeah, with 2
Very
tackles that
young.
were freshmen. And shout out Brian Kelly for having the gonads to play 2 freshmen
in the SEC
in the
West.
SEC. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, he gets an A+. He gets an A+ for that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's crazy.
Deshaun Womack at edge, people like a lot, and then Javion Tovano. That was a big recruiting win. They flipped from A&M, right?
Well, he was battling. It was between Texas and Texas A&M, and then late everyone's like, "Oh, the Texas wagon, hitching on Arch Manning," and then Brian Kelly said, "No, sorry about that. We want cornerback down here." So
yeah,
offensively, the efficiency wise, they were 9th in the country, and defensively, they were 17th in the country. So very, very good, and they got more talented. All right, they're one of my favorite teams to watch this year. They're gonna be very good, and as an A&M fan, I'm very nervous. We got to go there on the road in November, so. Tough scene. But yeah, so moving on to our 4th pick of the draft for me. This is going to shock everyone, and could be that I'm a homer. Could be that I'm a Texas A&M homer. But give me Mike Elko, dude. Give me Mike freaking Elko, dude. He is unbelievable. Everywhere he's been. Let me run through some stuff, right? So Duke, David Cutcliffe did a great job at Duke. He was there for like 12 or 13 years. He won the ACC Coach of the Year 2 times. Great, awesome. He gets fired because he went 5-7, 2-9, 3-9. Right. That was the standard there. When Mike Elko came in there. And recruiting ranking wise, they were 48th, 62nd, 57th in those years before Mike Elko came in. They're not highly recruiting. They're not a powerhouse, right? They're not. But Mike Elko, he's the defensive coordinator at Texas A&M for 4 seasons. Did a fantastic job. Led one of the best defenses in the country the year before he coached this year at Duke. He was Notre Dame DC for a year. He was defensive coordinator at Wake Forest. He coached back-to-back top 10 in total yards, right? Top 10 defense back-to-back at what school? Bowling Green.
Well, we know Bowling Green. Bowling Green's not a bad team. Okay,
Minnesota knows a lot about Bowling Green, don't they?
Yeah.
Don't they know a lot about them? But I'm just saying, he's a fantastic defensive coordinator, right? And the thing is, he's coached 10 consecutive top 50 defenses in total yards allowed. I mean, that's and not just at those top high caliber schools, talking Bowling Green, Wake Forest. Like that's a big deal. Duke, that's a big deal. Efficiency wise, their defense was not as good this year, right? 62nd in the country, but their offense was incredible. He hired Kevin Johns as his offensive coordinator, right? And he was at Texas Tech with Cliff Kingsbury. He was at Memphis with Mike Norvell, and he did a great job with both of those. He has the experience at a high level with high talent, and he hit it out of the park. Their quarterback, Riley Leonard, fantastic. Did a great job. 29th in the country in efficiency metrics. And it'd be very easy for Riley Leonard to go somewhere like Notre Dame. It'd be very easy for Riley Leonard to go to another place that needs a quarterback, like Alabama. Or, well, at the time, Alabama didn't think that they needed a quarterback, but, we'll talk about that another time. He stays there. They get him to stay there. Which is crazy. He went 9-4 this year, 5-3 in the, which was 3rd in the Coastal, and they won a bowl game. So, I mean, come on. That was fantastic. And their over-under win total was 3, and they won 8 games in the regular season. Are you serious? He was unbelievable. And this year, their over-under win total is 6.5. So that tells you anything about the kind of job that he's done there immediately. I don't know what will. So that's all I have to say. He also brought Tyler Santucci this year after Rob Smith left. He walked away. Tyler Santucci was linebacker coach at Texas A&M. Was also very highly talented. Great defensive coordinator. If you don't have anything to add on to that, I mean,
I'll just say I just could not have been more impressed with Mike Elko. I mean, I know Duke, never going to be competing and recruiting winning battles with Clemson and Florida State and Miami, but you could not help but be impressed by Mike Elko. And you saw what the damage it did to A&M when he left there. I mean, DJ Durkin is such a bum. I'm sorry. He's a bum.
I'm right there with you. I'm the biggest DJ Durkin hater out there. I am, and I'm a Texas A&M fan. And guess what? Everyone is in denial there that the Mike Elko loss was not that big of a deal.
Huge.
Are you serious? We were like 100th in the country in run defense with that talented of a front seven. Are you serious? Are you serious? And we had the best secondary in the country last year, arguably. I'm going to say arguably, okay? We had one of the best secondaries in the country last year, and everyone knew that they're running the ball, right? Let's get into a 4-man front. Let's do it. Let's do it with our 7 5-stars on the defensive line. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about in terms of Mike Elko was a huge loss and a big get for Duke. All right. So speaking of the SEC, that's it for today on that draft. All right. You can catch us in future episodes. We're going to finish that draft up. So pretty good team. Rundown. Christopher got Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly. It's pretty good. And I got Dan Lanning and Mike Elko. So we'll keep that in touch. So the next thing we wanted to talk about was SEC just came out. They had some meetings. They had some talks. Coaches voted to not have a 9-game conference season. Instead, remain with the 8 for just the year 2024, with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. So it'll be a 16-team conference, 8-game conference schedule. And everyone's kind of talking about, this is the narrative, Christopher, and I wanted to ask you about this. Is the SEC scared to play 9 conference games?
Play 9? No. Okay. Well, first of all, I kind of have a problem with this whole, story in general, because what actually happened and the real important thing that we should be talking about is not what everyone's talking about. Okay. Everyone made a big deal about the SEC coaches are soft. They don't want to play 9 games. They want to beat each other up, blah, blah. First of all, they're right. Now, 9 SEC games, it's a hell of a lot harder than 9 ACC games. Okay. We can all agree that. And if you're Auburn and you have to play Bama, Georgia, the rest of the SEC West, and then you got to go and play, either Tennessee or Florida. Well, maybe not Florida, but like South Carolina, Kentucky, that's unfair. All right. And you're going to get these kids hurt. All right. They already have a tough schedule. If you look at top 25 hardest schedules in the country, a lot of times the SEC is still always up there. And to be honest, it's a good thing for these smaller schools that get a big paycheck to come and get beat, and sometimes they beat them, which is cool. But the real story about this is actually they changed the way the SEC title game is played and how the matchup changes. The divisions will stay intact, okay? The East and the West. And it's to be determined whether Texas and Oklahoma, which ones are joining, if they're going to move someone over and just
primary bring both in the West. And secondary rivalries are also allegedly intact as well,
which is a big deal. And that's why we love college football, regional rivalries. It's such a big deal. But I'll say this too. The SEC title game is no longer determined by the divisions, East and West, right? This year you had LSU play Georgia. The winner of the West played the winner of the East, right? And typically most years it works out, except this year, where if the new schedule would be where it's the top 2 teams in the conference play each other, it would have been Tennessee having the tiebreaker over LSU and Bama, right? And now nobody would have wanted to see, a Joe Milton Tennessee team play Georgia and get blown out by, however many. They could have picked a score, right? But I mean, who knows? A healthy Hendon Hooker at a neutral site would have been really, really interesting. And that changes the way if you're Bama and you lose to LSU, right? Or you slip up to A&M and A&M's on a tear, right? And they're gonna go undefeated and run the table. You're still playing for something. If you're Bama, if you're still playing for that championship. I love that, and I think when you get a big conference like that, it does make a difference, and it's interesting. It's nice, now the East, it's getting better, but it'll make it helps the West teams, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think there's 3 arguments for why you would do 8 games versus 9. Now, official stance is me, at least on this podcast. I want 9 games. I want to watch 9 games, right? That's obviously the official stance.
As a fan. Well, yeah, as a fan, you want that.
As a fan.
You're a season ticket holder. You wanna watch all those home games, you know?
So now there's a bowl game argument, right? Let's get more teams in bowl games. I don't think it's a very strong argument. Whatever. Okay, that could be a reason that you want to do it. Okay, but these are coaches voting. So, I don't know. Money, okay? Obviously, your contract or your media rights deal becomes more valuable if you play 9 conference games, but they already just had that media deal. Plus, you're telling me there's not a clause in there? I'm not a lawyer, but you're telling me these guys are dumb enough to not have that in their clauses somewhere? There's going to be some kind of compensation if that was to happen. Playoff chances, the value of a loss in college football, it's just way more than a win. if you have 8 more, right? If you add one more conference game, that's 8 more games, right? That's 8 losses and 8 wins. Those 8 wins distributed to teams are not going to mean as much as those 8 losses distributed to another team in terms of like if you're trying to make the college football playoffs. Like if you're 8-2, right, and you have a chance to make the college football playoffs, which would you rather have as your final 2 games? Okay, Nebraska and Minnesota, no dig at Minnesota, or Abilene Christian and LSU if you're trying to make a run at the playoffs for that 12-team spot, which changes in 2024, by the way. Obviously, you're going to take Nebraska and Minnesota because you just have a better chance at like winning both of those games and winning out, going 10-2.
Because Nebraska's so bad.
Because Nebraska's so bad.
For the record, that's why.
For the record, it's not because Minnesota is so bad, right? It's because Nebraska stinks. But yeah, and then so there's that conversation. The last thing that we want to talk about real quickly before we head out, quickly, we're gonna go through. We're gonna inform you guys what are coaches we're gonna be rooting for this year. Who are coaches that you would sit down and have a beer with? We're gonna go by conference. We're gonna go by division. Absolutely. So I'll start. We're gonna go SEC. SEC West. Who am I taking to grab a beer with in the SEC West? How about Sam Pittman, the pit boss, Boss Hog? Are you telling me Dukes of Hazzards fans out there? Boss Hog. You know, that makes me Roscoe Pico Train. I'm having to stare at a brewski with them, you know. This dude, he literally calls his wife Mama Hog. Who has the gonads to do that? Right? If Harold Dawson called Susan Dawson Mama Hog, I mean,
bam!
I am making sure Dad's life insurance papers and are in sorts. So I think he's 61 years old, right? But that dude can hang for sure. You know, obviously, honorable mention, it would be Mike Leach, but obviously, rest in peace. Was probably my favorite coach in college football before he passed away this last year, which is such a bummer. That dude literally closed down bars. So, anyways, you got the SEC East. What's up with you?
To be honest, I was looking at the SEC East, and not that it's a dry conference in terms of personnel, and not a division in terms of personalities. But there's one that really rose to the top, and that's Shane Beamer. I mean, the way he handles his press conferences and just belittles reporters.
Love that. I love that. That's why we love Shane Beamer.
Yeah, it's more so the way he defends his players, and you can tell he cares. And that's, you know, and his coaching staff, and he's very strong-willed in terms of a person. So I think he'd be so fun to sit down and talk. Lastly, we'll give a current news update real quick. UTSA transfer wide receiver Zachary Franklin was the top available player in transfer portal. Just committed to Ole Miss, and he's the 19th person to go there and join Lane Kiffin. And they had a couple wide receivers coming in. They had Trey Harris, which highly sought after guy from La Tech, and then Chris Marshall, guy from Texas A&M, former 5-star from that recruiting class that we all know about. But he was dismissed from A&M and then dismissed from A&M and then dismissed from Ole Miss. And so you basically subtract out, you know, Chris Marshall and you add Zachary Franklin. And yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, that's all we have for today, guys. Thank you for tuning in. We got Twitter at the Redshirt Soph. That's just the Redshirt Soph. And you can send questions in at our Gmail, the Redshirt Sophomore at gmail.com. So thank you all for listening.